The last crumb. The wind screamed through the broken metal walls of the shelter. Snow drifted in through the cracks, settling like ash on the frozen floor. Inside, in the darkest corner, an alien mother held her baby close to her chest. Her name was Velai. Her skin was pale and cracked. Her hands shook from cold and hunger. She had not eaten in 3 days. Her baby, barely a few moons old, was weak. Its tiny hands reached for her face, not to play, but to beg. Velai looked down at the cloth beside her. There was only one thing left, a single crumb of bread. It had been part of a dry ration she found in a broken crate near the mines. She had saved the last piece, hoping to find more food before needing it, but no help came. No food, no fire, no mercy. She picked up the crumb. Her fingers trembled. Her stomach screamed. Her lips were dry and cracked. But she didn't eat it. She looked into her baby's eyes, too big, too hollow, and pressed the crumb to its lips. The baby took it with a soft sound, not even strong enough to cry. Velai smiled faintly, then leaned back against the wall, her arms wrapped tight around the child. Her breath came in short gasps. Her body was empty. Only the love for her child kept her heart beating. Outside, the snowstorm grew stronger. Each gust slammed against the walls like fists. Each sound made her flinch. She whispered to her baby in her native tongue. "I'm sorry, I tried." She closed her eyes, letting the cold numb her thoughts, but then something changed. A sound, not the wind. Footsteps, heavy ones, crunching in the snow. Her eyes snapped open. No one should be here. This place was abandoned. The mines were closed. The workers were gone. She had hidden here because no one came anymore. So who was walking toward the shelter? Her breath caught in her throat. She pulled her baby tighter, covering its head with her shawl. The footsteps stopped near the door. Silence. Then, a knock. Soft. Slow. She didn't answer. Didn't breathe. The door creaked. Velai's heart raced. Her legs were too weak to run. Her arms too tired to fight. She could only protect her baby with her body. The door opened a little. Cold air rushed in. And then, a hand appeared. It didn't reach toward her. It didn't hold a weapon. It placed something on the ground, a small metal container. Steam rose from it. Food. The hand also placed a glowing orange box. A heat pack. Warmth spread into the air. Velai stared, frozen in shock. Then the figure stepped back. She saw part of a face. A human. A man. Wrapped in heavy gear. His eyes were not cruel. They were tired, weathered, but calm. He didn't speak. He didn't step inside. He just nodded once and walked away. The door creaked again, closing behind him. Silence returned. Only the soft hiss of steam remained. Velai stayed still for a long time. Was it a trick? Poison? Or a trap? But the smell, it was too rich to ignore. Her baby stirred. It smelled the food too. She crawled forward slowly, every muscle burning. The metal of the container was warm. She opened the lid. A thick broth. Vegetables. Maybe some meat. Her hand shook as she touched it. She dipped a finger and brought it to her lips, warm, salty, real. She fed the baby first, tiny sips. The child drank weakly, then settled into sleep. Then Velai brought the container to her mouth. She drank. One sip, then another, and then the tears came. She didn't cry from sadness. She cried because the warmth hurt, because her body had forgotten what kindness tasted like, because someone she didn't know had seen her, and instead of turning away, had helped. She finished the food slowly, every bite a battle between hunger and disbelief. When it was gone, she sat back, eyes still wide. Who was he? Why would a human help her? They had always turned her away before. She didn't know, but in that moment, with her baby sleeping full for the first time in days and heat finally in the air, she whispered one word. Thank you. She didn't know if he would hear it, but she meant it. The cold wind howled outside the broken shelter as the alien mother sat curled in a corner, her baby pressed against her chest. Her arms trembled, not just from the cold, but from hunger. The last crumb she had was gone. She had fed it to her child. Her stomach felt like an empty cave. Her lips were cracked. She hadn't eaten in days. And then she heard it again. Footsteps, heavy ones, crunching through the snow. The mother gasped softly and pulled her baby tighter. Her heart pounded fast. She looked toward the door, nothing but a weak metal sheet, hanging loose. Anyone could come in. She had no weapon, no strength to run, only her child to protect. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a soft knock. She froze. Knock. Knock. Not a bang. Not a forceful entry. Just a quiet knock. Then, slowly, the metal door creaked open. Cold air rushed in, making her shiver harder. Figure stood in the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in thick human gear. A breathing mask covered most of his face. His boots were muddy with snow. In one hand, he held a glowing orange box. In the other, something steaming. The mother's first instinct was fear. She pushed herself back against the wall. Her baby whimpered. She whispered something in her own alien tongue, a soft lullaby of protection. But the man didn't move forward. He slowly placed the steaming object down. It was a food container. The warm smell of broth and bread filled the air. Her stomach growled loud. He then bent down and set the glowing box near the door. Heat spread from it, warming the frozen air. Still, he said nothing. The man turned, walked back to the door, and paused. With a low voice, he said, "For the baby, and you." Then he stepped outside. The door creaked again, this time closing halfway. Not locked, just left open. She stared at the food. Her hands shook. Her eyes filled with tears. Was it a trick? Poison? Or was it real? Her baby let out, a soft, weak cry. She looked down. The little one's tiny hand reached toward the smell. She moved slowly. Her bones ached. Crawling forward, she reached the container. It was still warm. Her fingers hovered above it. Then, carefully, she dipped her finger into the broth and tasted it. Her eyes widened. Real food, salt, spice, warmth, nothing bitter, nothing fake. She lifted the bowl and helped her baby first. The child drank with small gulps, then rested, finally quiet. The mother stared at the rest of the food. She had not eaten in 3 days. With shaking hands, she brought the bowl to her lips. 1 sip, 2, then a bite of soft bread. It was too much. She couldn't stop the tears. They came heavy, hot, and silent. She ate slowly. Every mouthful felt like life returning to her bones. The food was gone too fast, but the warmth remained, and so did the heat from the glowing box. She crawled back to the wall and sat down. The baby was asleep now, full and peaceful. The mother looked at the door. Why would a human help her? They had passed her before, looked away. Some had even chased her off. What made this one different? Outside, through the gap in the door, she could just see his shape, sitting in the snow back against a tree, helmet still on. He wasn't watching her. He wasn't waiting for thanks. He had just given and waited nearby. Not close, not far. Just enough in case she needed help. She pulled the blanket tighter around her child. In her old world, humans were whispered about. Strong, dangerous, wild. But this one had brought food and warmth without a single word of demand. She closed her eyes. She couldn't trust him. Not yet. But she couldn't forget him either. The human hadn't saved her yet, but he had stopped her from dying today. And That was enough. Tomorrow maybe she would follow him. Maybe she'd find out who he was. But for now, she held her child close, both warm for the first time in weeks. And somewhere outside, the human waited, silent, watching stars fall above the cold sky. The next morning, the cold returned before the light. Thin frost spread across the metal walls like white veins. The alien mother opened her eyes slowly. Her arms still held her sleeping baby close, warm and safe. But her own body felt stiff and weak. The food from last night had helped, but it was not enough to erase days of hunger. Then she smelled it again. Food, fresh, warm. Her eyes snapped to the door. The metal sheet was open a little wider now. Just outside, sitting neatly on a rock, was another food container. Steam rose gently from it. The glowing heat box had been replaced too, this one still shining bright orange, filling the air with comfort. She didn't move at first. It wasn't a dream. He had come again. The human. No footsteps this time. No knock. No sound. Just the gift. Left. Quietly. Kindly. She sat up slowly. Her arms ached. Her hands were cold. She looked down at her baby, still asleep, face peaceful for once. With careful movements, she crawled toward the door. Her eyes scanned the white forest outside, but she saw no one. The human was gone. Or maybe hiding nearby. She reached the container, opened it. Inside was a bowl of thick soup, vegetables, some kind of soft meat. A piece of flatbread sat on the side. It smelled even better than yesterday's meal. She stared at it. Her throat tightened. She hadn't seen kindness in so long. She didn't know how to accept it. Her fingers gripped the edge of the bowl. Her eyes watered. She sat down, right there, on the floor near the door, and placed the bowl in her lap. Slowly, quietly, she took the first spoonful. And then, she broke. Tears fell before the second bite. Her shoulders shook. She tried to stay quiet so she wouldn't wake her child, but her body couldn't hold it anymore. She cried. Soft, broken sobs that came from the center of her chest. She cried for the days she had wandered without food, for the times she had begged and been pushed away, for the nights her child cried from hunger while she held back her own pain. She cried because someone had fed her, not for money, not to trade, but just because. The soup was warm, her hands were cold, her heart was confused. Why would a human help her? In her world, humans were called the hard ones. Strong, proud, unbending, dangerous. But this man brought her food and left without asking for anything. Who was he? Why was he here? She ate slowly between tears. Every bite warmed a part of her soul. The bread tasted like hope. The soup carried a memory she didn't know she still had. Of family, of fire, of laughter long gone. When the bowl was empty, she sat still for a long time. The snow outside sparkled. The wind had calmed. Even the birds were quiet. Then her baby stirred and let out a soft sound. She wiped her face quickly and crawled back. The child reached up and touched her cheek with tiny fingers. The mother smiled through tears. This wasn't just food. It was a message. She looked back at the door. The human had come twice now. Not close, not inside, but just near enough to help without scaring her. He understood her fear. That alone was rare. She wrapped her baby in the blanket and stood slowly. Her legs were still weak, but something in her had grown stronger. She stepped out of the shelter, for the first time in days. Snow crunched under her bare feet. The cold bit her skin, but she didn't go far, just to the spot where the food had been left. She bent down and picked up the heat box. It was still warm. Next to it was something new, a small square card. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. On the card was a simple drawing, 3 lines and a circle. She didn't understand it fully, but it looked like a map, a path, to somewhere safe. Maybe to him, maybe to food, maybe to something more. She looked out at the trees, no sign of the human, but his presence was everywhere, in the warmth, in the food, in the silence. She pressed the card to her chest. Tomorrow, she thought, I will follow this path, not for her, but for her child. Because someone out there still cared. Snowflakes floated down like feathers as the alien mother stepped out of the broken shelter, her baby wrapped tightly in cloth against her chest. Her feet were bare. Her body was weak, but her eyes were steady. In one hand, she held the small card the human had left. The drawing on it was simple, a path, a mark, and a symbol that looked like fire. She didn't know the language, but she knew one thing. He wanted her to follow. And for the first time in weeks, she believed someone truly meant no harm. The journey was not far, but every step felt heavy. The wind burned her skin. Her knees nearly gave out more than once. But when the baby stirred against her chest, she kept walking. She whispered soft words, promises of warmth, food, and something like peace. After some time, she reached a cluster of large rocks with metal parts built around them. A small dome stood between two broken cargo walls. Smoke gently rose from a pipe. The air smelled like cooked roots and something sweet. She paused behind a large boulder. She saw him, the human. He was kneeling by a fire, feeding wood into it. Without his helmet, she could see his face, rugged, lined, and tired, but not cruel. His eyes watched the fire like it was speaking to him. He didn't hear her footsteps. She could run now, but she didn't. She stepped forward. The man turned and saw her, but he didn't reach for a weapon. He just stood up slowly, his hands empty. She froze, ready to flee if he moved fast. But he didn't. He pointed to a chair near the fire, then gently to her child. She hesitated, then nodded once. Her legs almost gave out as she reached the chair. She sat with a shaky breath. The fire was warm. The heat crept into her bones. The human placed a cup of broth on a flat stone near her, not too close. Then he walked a few steps away and sat down without a word. They sat in silence. Only the fire spoke. Finally, she whispered, "My name." Her voice cracked. She hadn't used it in so long. Was Veli. The human looked at her, his head tilted. "I forgot it," she continued, staring at the fire. "They took everything. My home, my mate, my tribe. When I fled with my baby, I stopped saying my name." "What use is a name when no one calls it?" The man's brow lowered, but not in anger. "They said I was bad luck," she added. "A widow brings death. A crying child brings beasts. No one wanted me near." She looked down at her baby, who was sleeping peacefully. I almost believed them. The human didn't interrupt. He just listened. "My mate died in a mine," she whispered. "A human mine. An accident. I begged them to help me. Food, shelter, anything. They said I was extra weight. I ran before they threw us out by force." Her voice broke. "I thought we would die in the snow." She looked at him now, eyes red. "But you brought food, twice." The man gave a slow nod, then finally spoke. "I've seen too many die from cold and silence. I didn't want it to happen again." His voice was low, calm, and carried no judgment. She swallowed hard. "Why?" He looked into the fire for a long time before answering. "Because someone once saved me too," he said, "when I was broken, when I had nothing left. A soldier like me gave me food and told me, 'Live.' I don't forget that." Ville blinked. He reached into his coat and pulled out something small, a folded cloth. He placed it gently on the stone beside her cup. "Blanket," he said, "for the baby." Her hands trembled as she took it. The cloth was soft and smelled clean. She wrapped it around her child with care. The silence returned, but it was a peaceful silence now. Not cold, not cruel. She looked around at the camp. It was small, patched together with old metal and cloth, but safe. There were tools, food crates, and even a small solar panel charging in the weak light. "Is this your home?" she asked softly. The man nodded. "It's not much, but it's enough." She stared at the fire, then back at him. "Can we stay?" He didn't hesitate. "As long as you need." Her throat tightened again, but this time from something different. Not pain, not fear, but something she had forgotten long ago. Hope. "My name is Veli," she said again, this time louder, stronger. The human smiled. "Good to meet you, Veli." And for the first time in a long time, she smiled back. Veli had never seen a human kitchen before, not one like this. It was small, made from old ship panels and storage crates, but inside, it felt like a different world. The walls held strange tools, glowing buttons, and shelves stacked with tins of food and dried roots. In the center was a heating slab with a flat iron pan on top already warm. The human called it a cookstone. He had shown her how to turn it on, how to stir without burning the bottom, and how to mix the spice packs. His voice was patient. His steps were quiet. He didn't stand over her or correct her every move. He just worked beside her, cleaning gear or chopping strange vegetables in silence. She liked that. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. Her baby slept in a soft carrier strapped to her front. The child had grown stronger, skin no longer pale, cries less sharp. The warmth and food were healing both of them slowly. She stirred the pot and breathed in the smell. Soup, with lentils, root vegetables, and something called salt flakes. It was rich, simple, and full of life. She added a few herbs from the jar he had handed her earlier. It smelled like something from her past, back before the mines, before the hunger, before her name had been forgotten. She glanced over her shoulder. The human, whose name she now knew was Mason, was fixing a broken light. His sleeves were rolled up, showing arms marked with old scars and burns. He worked with quiet focus, occasionally glancing at her but never speaking unless she did first. She respected that. In her old life, males talked too much, ordered too much, took too much. But Mason had never raised his voice, never touched her, without permission, never asked for anything in return. He had given, and still expected nothing. Still, she had to do something. "I want to help," she had said that morning. "Not just eat, not just rest." He had simply nodded and showed her the kitchen. Now with the soup ready, she filled 2 bowls and placed them on the table. Mason washed his hands, sat down, and picked up a spoon. They ate quietly at first. Then, after a few bites, he said, "You cook like someone who knows hunger." Veli looked up. Her face didn't smile, but her eyes did. "I do." He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. Later that afternoon, she cleaned the tools, organized the food crates, and found herself humming a soft tune, a lullaby from her childhood. The baby cooed in the corner, wrapped in the warm cloth Mason had given her. The outpost felt less like a shelter now, more like a home. Mason had even cleared out a small sleeping corner just for her and the baby. It had a padded mat, clean blankets, and a light that responded to her touch. Still, part of her stayed alert, because kindness never came free. Not in the old world. But this wasn't the old world. Mason hadn't tried to own her. He hadn't looked at her with hunger or pity, only with quiet understanding. That scared her more than anything because it felt too good to last. As the sun set, Mason stepped outside to check the wind turbines. She watched him through the window. His movements were slow but strong. He was used to being alone, but he didn't seem to mind her presence. In fact, he had started setting an extra bowl without being asked. That night, when she laid the baby down and crawled under the blanket, she didn't shake with fear, not because she felt safe, but because, for the first time, she wasn't entirely sure she had to be afraid anymore. In the middle of the night, a sound made her eyes open. It was faint, a soft beep, not from the kitchen, from the outer sensors. Mason was already awake, standing by the small control panel. The red light blinked once, then stopped. "Just dust," he whispered. But Vele saw something in his eyes. Worry. He stood, still for a long moment, then checked the door locks. She sat up. "Is someone out there?" He shook his head slowly. "Don't know. Could be wind. Could be nothing." But neither of them believed that. The air had changed. The silence had shifted. Something, or someone, was getting close. Mason turned off the lights. Vele held her baby tighter. The kitchen that had felt warm now sat in shadow, but she wasn't running. Not yet. Not this time. The wind carried a strange silence the next morning. No birds sang. No snow fell. The cold was sharp, not from weather, but from something deeper. Something watching. Mason stood outside the outpost, his eyes scanning the trees beyond the hills. He had checked the motion sensors twice. Nothing. But his gut told him otherwise. Something wasn't right. Inside, Vele rocked her baby slowly, the child restless in her arms. She watched the door, watched Mason's tense posture. She knew this feeling. It was the same one she had felt the night her mate died in the mines, the same silence before everything changed. She stepped out and walked to Mason's side. He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed fixed ahead. But he spoke quietly. "Someone knows you're here." Vele nodded once. "They always find me." Mason turned. His face was calm, but his voice was firm. "Not this time." They spent the day preparing. Mason gave her a simple device, a silent alarm button, and showed her how to lock every door from inside. He reinforced the shutters, checked his tools, and even buried some gear outside just in case. Vele helped where she could, but her hands shook. Not from weakness, from memory. When someone hunted you once, you never forgot the sound of boots coming too close. Evening came. They ate little. The warmth in the kitchen felt thinner. The fire didn't crackle as loud. The outpost felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. That night, Vele didn't sleep. Neither did Mason. He sat by the window with a small device, in hand, some kind of sensor gun. She sat with her baby, holding the child close, listening to every creak and shift in the wind. At midnight it came. The sound of heavy steps. Not one person. Multiple, crunching through snow. No talking, no flashlights, no warnings. Just the slow, steady steps of people who had come to take. Mason's head turned sharply. His hand tightened around the device. Vele's breath caught in her throat. Then, a voice. Rough, deep, in her own language. "Vele, you're hard to track." She froze. That voice. She knew it. Kelvar. He had once been her protector after her mate died. Then, her captor. He had tried to claim her. When she refused, he spread lies, said she was cursed, said her child was poisoned. He turned everyone against her. She ran that night, holding her baby in the dark, hiding in scrap piles and cold tunnels. And now he was here. "I told you I'd find you," Kelvar said. "The baby's not yours anymore. It belongs to the clan. Come out, and I won't burn the place down." Mason stepped forward and opened the window shutter. "Back off," he said, his voice low but sharp. Kelvar laughed. "A human? You let one of them feed you? You're lower than I thought, Vele." She stood up, her child pressed to her chest. She walked to Mason's side and looked through the window. Kelvar stood with 3 others, weapons slung across their shoulders. All wore thick armor and blank eyes. "She stays," Mason said calmly. "Try anything and you'll regret it." Kelvar's smile faded. "Do you really think you can stop us?" Mason didn't answer. He just aimed the sensor device. Kelvar didn't flinch. "You don't understand our laws. She's property." Vele stepped forward. Her voice cracked but did not break. "I am not property. she said. Not anymore. Kelvar tilted his head. You sound brave now. But you'll beg again like before. The air was still. Then Mason stepped out. Valet gasped. No, he'll kill you. But Mason didn't look back. He walked straight into the snow, stopping just a few feet from Kelvar. He dropped his weapon. I don't want to fight, he said. But I will end one. Kelvar's men tensed. Mason looked him in the eyes. If you think you can take her, do it now. Kelvar blinked. Then Mason added, but you'll never leave this forest again. Silence. Even the wind stopped. For a long second, no one moved. Then, Kelvar laughed, but it was empty. Nervous, he stepped back. Not today, he muttered. But she's marked now. She'll never be safe. He turned and vanished into the snow with his men. Mason waited until they were gone, then came back inside. Valet was shaking, but not from fear, from rage. I will never run again, she whispered. Mason nodded. You won't have to. She looked at him, her eyes full of something fierce and new. Not fear, not weakness, but fire. The snow had stopped falling. The wind no longer howled. For the first time in many weeks, the sky was clear, and sunlight reached the trees without being swallowed by gray clouds. The outpost stood quiet. The danger was gone, but its memory lingered in every shadow, every broken branch where footsteps had passed. Belly stood at the small kitchen counter, slowly slicing soft vegetables with a worn human knife. The blade was dull, the board cracked, but she handled them with calm hands. Her baby slept nearby, cheeks full, skin warm. The fire inside the outpost crackled softly, as if whispering peace. Behind her, Mason worked on fixing a broken panel near the window. He was humming something quiet and tuneless, but it filled the room with life. Since the night Kelvar left, neither of them had spoken much about it. There was no need. The message was clear. They had survived, but surviving wasn't enough anymore. Living. That was what Vele wanted now. She stirred the pot of soup gently. The smell of spices filled the air. It reminded her of the first time he had brought her food. She remembered how she had cried while eating, afraid it would be taken away, afraid it was too good to be true. Now, she was cooking for him. She set the table with 2 bowls, not 3. Mason never took more than he needed. She placed a small stone in the center, engraved with her tribe's symbol for gratitude. Then she quietly called his name. He turned, wiping his hands with a cloth. When he saw the table, he paused. For me? He asked softly. She nodded. You gave me food when I had nothing. Now I give it back. He smiled. Thank you. They sat across from each other, steam rising from their bowls. Vele waited until he tasted the first spoon. His eyes widened slightly. This is better than mine. She laughed, a real, quiet laugh that surprised them both. They ate slowly, savoring the warmth. After a while, she said, You could have walked away. That night. Left me in that shelter. He shook his head. I couldn't. I saw your baby's eyes. I knew if I left, I'd never forgive myself. She looked down at her hands. No one's ever stayed before. No one ever chose me. Mason reached across the table and gently touched her fingers. I didn't choose you out of pity, Veli. I stayed because you deserved to be helped. You still do. Tears touched the corners of her eyes, but she didn't cry. Instead, she asked, What happens now? Mason leaned back and looked at the quiet forest beyond the window. We build something better. She tilted her head. Here? He nodded. Why not? The land is good. I've got tools. You've got skills. And that little one, he smiled at the baby, deserves to grow up safe. Vele's chest rose with a slow, deep breath. The idea of staying no longer felt dangerous. It felt possible. She stood, walked to the small sleeping space and returned with something in her hands, a folded cloth and a necklace with a dull stone. She placed it in front of him. "My mate gave this to me before he died," she said. "It means peace after fire. I think you should have it." Mason stared at the stone. "It's yours," she nodded. "It still is. But now, you're part of what gave me peace." He didn't speak. He just picked up the necklace, studied it with care, and then placed it around his neck. Outside, the snow had begun to melt just a little, as if spring had decided to visit early. That evening, as the stars rose, they stood by the fire together. The baby giggled in Veli's arms, reaching for the sparks above the flames. Mason stood beside them, holding a small box of seeds. "Vegetables," he said. "Real ones, for a garden." She smiled. "I've never planted anything before." "You've already planted something," he said quietly. "Hope." She looked up at him, searching his face. "Are you alone in this world?" He shook his head. "Not anymore." Silence wrapped around them like a blanket. A safe silence. A soft one. Then Veli did something she had not done in many, many moons. She reached out and held his hand, and he held it back. In that quiet place, in that simple outpost with cracked windows and patched walls, a future had begun. It wasn't loud, it wasn't fast, but it was real, and it was theirs.